align within my banking application using an AI model, right? So because that way you need to be assessing the probability of occurrence of the AI algorithm marking good data as bad data. So that's something that the reputation damage about damaging the user's image, right? Um, and this is all about trust, ethics. 42001 talks about, okay, so my organization has the money, right? So I'm able to lease some data center spaces, a colo space, or I can lease web servers. I can go to any web service provider, and okay, I have that person ready. I'm okay about the business impact that may occur if my AI algorithm it doesn't work on the way that it's supposed to or that it's intended to do, right? So my risk assessment says I'm okay if I'm in between these two results, right? And then I have all the regulations ready on top on my country to say my infrastructure who runs the next level, the next layer of processing data, and my bias and my risk assessment, my gap analysis says that I'm okay to run it publicly available. So the next step is to make sure that the infrastructure, the AI algorithm, the business impact aligns with the stakeholders' expectations. So the business has the money, the business has come through a thorough process on risk assessing the AI model to run that reputation damage. So all on top, we need to make sure that the business is aligned to whatever that we are creating from the architectural point. The okay of the stakeholders is the most important part of deploying this type of models. Why? Because the AI management system that we have as the ISO 42001 has to have the commitment of the stakeholders on that company. So we have all those levels aligned. We have everything on hand to start working on a ISO 42001 regulation on our companies. So what are the differences? Like we were talking before, right? The UA Act talks about the risk base of running AI models on our organizations, and is asking us for a certification or a certified process that is a CE certification on the EU. On the US, the way that they're approaching this is that they have different certification process or regulations that we need to be part of it, right? Specifically by state, we have the Colorado Act and the New York Act. But on top of those two by state, we also have the NIST regulation on AI risk assessment model. NIST is a federal, it's part of the federal government, and they are the office that regulates all the technology processes, frameworks for all the offices across the country, right? So the DoD, the Department of Defense, runs based on NIST, and there's a lot of regulation models that they have. If you have a chance, go out to the internet, look for NIST, NIST. There's a bunch of public information that you can read as a framework. It tells you the good to have, right? The nice to have on the organizations. It doesn't apply everything for the same company, but it's gonna give you a common ground rule. And most if you're working with US based companies, because these are the frameworks that every US company uses today. So that's going to help you guys a lot. On the way for China, uh, the audits, right? Security audits about the way that we're using those models. The controls about the Gen AI, the output of those Gen AI models that we have out there publicly available. and of course with the state. So if you see, we have a common ground rules here is that we need to make sure if we're going to be assessing AI models with the organization, even if we are ready, we have the infrastructure, we have the controls, we have the stakeholders ready and okay with the approval of deploying this type of controls for ISO 42001. We need to have the government's alignment based on the country that we're deploying these controls to make sure that we have a successful deployment. And like we were talking just a brief minute ago, the NIST. I mean, the risk assessment management for AI is awesome. I mean, it's a you must have as part of your day-to-day activities. Go ahead and read that document. Is free. It's open for the public, and it's a pretty good. Self-audit and self-regulated control that you can apply to your organizations with the hand of a ISO 42001 controls. And so what is it? And let's okay, so we have the infrastructure, we have the money to put in, we have the risk assessment, we have the controls ready, and we have the stakeholders on board with all this adventure, right? But what is it? I mean, what is ISO 42001? So ISO 42001, we're gonna step back here for a minute. It's a AI management system, right? It was publicly available on December 2023. So what it says is, what's the ethical way and what is the safest way to deploy AI models that we are going to be developing inside our organizations? What do I mean with this? Banking, health, uh, you can also talk about like Gen AI models. So that type of organizations, it is not, what is not is ISO 42001 doesn't regulate the use for me on my organization to use AI tools, for example, ChatGPT or Gemini, right? So ISO 42001 goes a little bit above that line because ISO 42001 is for companies that are developing AI software or SaaS platforms to provide a service. Okay, so it's going to be publicly available or it's going to be a internal AI available model. So that's ISO 40001. That's the coverage, right? So, and what is it says? So we have our internal policies, our IT AI group policies, aligned with the ethical use principles for regulations in the country to treat, process, and store data. So we need to have the data available. We need to have the data always, and we need to have our risk assessment completed. We need to have our disaster recovery plans in place. We need to have our continuous a business continuous plan as well. So that's ISO 42001. So it's a way for the business to certify and being accountable for the process of data and the outcome of those biases. Okay, that's ISO 42001. Just to like put it out there and clear it out. That's what we are looking for to certify during a ISO certification process. And from here, I mean, what is it that the landscape of the process? How are we going to be certifying our company AI model? We have the infrastructure, we have a risk assessment, we have our internal team trained, and we have the stakeholders ready to go on this process. So to start with, and this is like the baseline for every ISO deployment, we need to have a scope of service. So we need to make sure, and what do I mean with a scope? um, what's the process that I can repeat every time and that I can document it every time and I can audit it every time? What's the scope that I'm going to be certifying? The input cleansing of that data to create a data source of it, or the way that the data source data gets processed through a AI algorithm, the impact and the outcome for that data. So this is what I'm going to be processing, right? So I'm going to be processing from where am I getting that data, how my AI model process it, and then the output of that Gen AI model, and where it's going to be stored at, the way that I'm securing that data. So that's the scope that we're looking to certify. That's like the key point here when we talk about a ISO certification process. The scope, everything is about the scope. So we need to have a process that we can repeat, that we can document it, and we can audit it every single time. From there, we need to start creating that policy of use for that for the scope of the process, right? So the company has their own IT department. They have their information management system for ISO 27001, and they have their processes and procedures. And also, we need to have a processes and procedures for the AI processing. So that this is a different group within the company, within the IT organization, and we have an SOP that is called the Standard Operation Procedure that is going to have those processes and policies for our organizations. And sorry, let me see. I think we have some questions. Sorry, I see a couple of check your GSD. Oh no, sorry, just internal message. Sorry. So from there, we need to make that inventory, right? So what are the algorithms that we're going to be using? Where's going to be processing at, and where's going to be the data relying on? Okay. So we have the AI policy, the scope of the process aligned with the policy for the company, and then we make the inventory of what is it that is involved within the processing of that data using that AI algorithm. Now that we know where's going to be saved at, where's going to be processed at, where's going to be saved after the process. So there's where we're going to be doing our risk assessment, right? As part of that gap analysis process, so we have the risk assessment. And from there, we need to make that a statement of applicability that says, yes, your AI model has all of these controls that we're looking for that is required for a ISO 42001 certification process. Or we have observations or non-conformities, right? Once that we're able to solve those critical observations or the non-conformity, we have an okay from the leading auditor and the person that's going to be taking this process within your organization. We have the okay to make the deployment. So to start everything to get ready for the external auditor to come out to the company and assess our AI model. So this is a very critical part of it within all the process that we have for ISO 42001, the risk assessment. Why? Because it's part of the gap analysis that we need to make sure that we're bridging that gap in between the source of the data, the algorithm for the AI model, and the output. So in between the process and the output, we need to make sure that the impact of the bias of those processes are within our organization controls, and that we are okay with the risk that represents, right? So once that we have all those layers lined up, we have the infrastructure, we have the data, we have the people within the organization for the IT structure, and we have the stakeholders, okay, and the most and better part of the process is the risk assessment. I mean, during the gap analysis, we need to have the okay within the company impact publicly, and the risk and the risk about the AI processes that we're going to be putting in between those certification processes. So whenever that we have everything as ready, so we need to have the documentation ready. So ISO standard talks about that we need to identify the process. We need to make sure that is a process that we can repeat, that we can create documentation from it, and that we can audit it, right? So if we can reproduce that step every single time and we have the documentation ready, that means that it's a scope that we can certify. So that's the part of the prepare the documentation, and there's where we're gonna be starting the implementation for the AI management system. What's the keystone here for the project? People. So people. Always make sure that you have the people that is related to the AI algorithm processing on board. I mean, we have the stakeholders saying yes, but the way that we can make this project successful is to have the people on board. So because there's going to be always a resistance for changing the way that they were working things before. That's why we need to make sure that we have awareness sessions. We need to have training sessions with the people that's going to be inside that scope that we define at the beginning. So training, we need to have people trained. That's part of what of the controls during this process. So make sure to have all your documentation about training sessions. Everything needs to check in, right? So we need to have a proof of people being trained, either by an external people that comes to make that training. We need to have diplomas, certification process, badges, or we need to have the training sessions, check-in sheets about telling that we have the people coming into the awareness and training sessions. And the most important part also is the incident response team. So who's gonna be responsible of? So we have the infrastructure, we have the data, we have the train, the people that got trained, and we have the stakeholders. But what's gonna happen if during my risk assessment, right, on the gap analysis process, we detect that who's gonna be supporting the AI models incident? Because this is a different part of the organization, IT group. To be able to manage this. So the incident response team is people that has access, because also people controls during ISO 42001. We need to have people that has access as part of those controls for the AI models, the AI algorithms, to make sure that the biases are not like overlapping out of the scope of agreement that we have. So every time that we have a AI model problem, we need to go with the incident response team, create the ticket, and they're going to be able to handle it. So that's part of the internal process, because every time that the external auditor comes in and checks the health of the process, we need to have the documentation about those incidents and the way that it got resolved. So those observations, those non-conformity, uh, they need to be treated as part of the certification process. So we need to put it on a high priority during the process. So now that we have the model that is tuned up, so we need to be monitoring, reviewing the checks, and auditing our AI algorithms to make sure that we are within the scope of certification. Once that we're able to repeat this process, like we were saying, so we need to be able to reproduce it. So we need to be able to monitor it. We need to be able to review the output, and we need to be doing some audits and checks on the system. Once that we put in control that pass deployment, so that's where the continual improvement process comes in. So we need to make sure, now that we have the model running, that we'll already tune it up, we need to make sure to identify internally on our company the way to make the AI processes better, right? It also has to have some financial assessment checks. I mean, how can I run it for the less, right, without impacting on the processing output that we have, and the availability and all the security among it. So we need to make sure if we can make it a more reliable model without spending that amount of money that we used to have before, the better. And from there, I mean, What's the outcome? So we already talked about the scope of support, the risk assessment, impact assessment, all the process that we have in between about certifying the AI model within our organization. So it's gonna tell out to the customer, to the public, that we are a responsible company, ethically running AI models, that our risk and impact management assessment is certified as part of this ISO certification process, that we are accountable for the data that we process, the data that we acquire to be processed, and that our alignment for the algorithms that we have running are ethically and responsibly being run in our organization. So that's the output on all of this. Go out publicly to say we are a governance AI responsible company doing a risk and impact assessment within our organization to be accountable for running to be able to run AI algorithms to provide a service to the public. So that's like the end result. This is my badge saying, sorry, this is my badge saying I'm ISO 42001 certified, and I'm an ethical company running data publicly out there, right? So that's like the result that we're looking for on the certification process. So we were talking briefly about controls, right? Clauses. So what it says, I'm sorry. Um, During those controls that we have, or these clauses for the certification process, so we have from 4 to 10 that are the more relevant during all of this. So the organization, we need to make sure that my organization, if you see, this is like the keystone in all the ISO 42001 certification process. So that's why it was important for this chat about is my organization ready to be AI certified for ISO 42001. So, because the keystone for all of this is my organization needs to be ready. I need to have money. I need to have the funds. I need to have the infrastructure. I need to have the people trained and ready. And I need to have the stakeholders aligned with what we are defining as a scope. So, because that's like the baseline for the rest of the process. So having your organization aligned with a ISO management system, it's better if you have a 27,000 one, right? Because that means that you already have most some of the controls, and you can share those controls from ISO 42001. That's a different conversation. So you have those controls aligned to ISO 42001. So once that I just stepped out from, is my organization ready? So yes, I have funds, I have infrastructure, I have the people, I have the stakeholders, in this case leadership. So leadership is committed to make this deployment to work, right? So he's going to be putting all the effort from the management section of the company to make sure that the rest of the people that is part of the scope for the ISO certification process that is going to be involved actively during the certification process. Because we were talking before, right? From the top down, we need to make sure that we push down all those requirements, and we need to tell the people that they need to make sure that they're committed to the process as well. Because on the change management process, people is always the number one step to resolve during changing the processes for the company. So from there, we need to make that planning, right? So we need to make sure that bridging the gap, doing the risk assessment, so identifying the risk, the AI impact on the organization, and we need to allocate some resources. It's either people, infrastructure, or money to make sure that everything is aligned, right? And from there, we need to make sure that we have the people. So this is control 7 people. So support and competence, that means that we need to have people trained and we need to have the infrastructure ready. And by infrastructure, we need to have that support group that is going to be managing that infrastructure. And then the class number 8 is the operations and the controls. So life cycle, we have either ISO, part of the ISO 20000, like the help desk management, or you can use a assessment for the life cycle, an ITIL approach, ITIL, or you can use a COVID approach as well. But if we are talking ISO for 42001, it's either you can align it to ISO 20000, or you can use either, we were talking about NIST and IST, so you can use a NIST control, you can use ITIL, ITIL, or you can use COVID. So those three are like IT management process, overview, design, operate, and change. Uh, so you can use either or. And so we need to make sure that during that lifecycle management for the IT service delivery, so we have a continuous monitoring of those services that we're offering out there. So again, on the class 8, you can use ITIL, you can use COVID, you can use NIST, because it's gonna give you the best practices. It's not gonna tell you what to do. It's gonna give you the option to describe the best practices on how to make those performance evaluations, the incident management process, the change management process, the problem management, and how to continuously improve the system by designing it. So that's the neat part about talking on ITO framework. It's a really cool one. It's been out there for tons of years, so it's a pretty good and mature process that you can use based on ITO. And from there, so once that I'm able to monitor it, that I'm able to audit it, I need to make sure that I can improve it, right? How? By performance evaluating the system, making corrective actions to enhance the way that the model works. So that's the way that your IT environment is going to be growing up, and is going to be more mature, because you're able to monitor it, you're able to audit it, and you're able to manage it based on day-to-day operation. And so we've been talking about the AI risk assessment. So pretty much the risk assessment is that gap, right, in between what is the vulnerabilities that we have on the AI system, what are the harms, in this case, the bias, the privacy, the safety of running that model. So we need to analyze the severity on the impact, the probability of that severity of the impact, and the risk that we have for the data and the model for the algorithm on the AI. So we need to identify, we need to try and mitigate the most of the severities that we have. And once that we are past the mitigation process, we need to make sure that if my organization is okay with the risk assessment past the mitigation process, right? So from the security standpoint, we need to make sure that we run those vulnerability checks on the system. So we have the security, like the targets within the model that we can reach. So pretty much it's going to be like a pen test, right? So we need to identify what are the vulnerabilities. So we need to have what are the data breaches that probably might occur, or what are the biases that my model is going to create, right? I need to mitigate those risks, and the result is going to be a part of the decision for the management to see if they are okay to move on with that level of risk or not. Because on the case for legal services, finance, or in the case of healthcare, if the bias, I mean the output of my AI model goes out the boundaries of good data, for example, and this is going to be just a small and quick example, right? So I have a AI model that checks the X-rays for the patients to see if they have lung cancer, right? So what's going to be doing? I'm going to be doing YOLOs. I'm going to be using machine learning, and I'm going to be using like neural networks to determine if that X-ray has the probability to go out and become a tumor in the patient. So if my bias, my probability of occurrence on my AI algorithm doesn't work correctly, so I'm going to be giving false positives, right? So I'm going to be processing X-rays, and the result is going to be saying, yes, this patient is going to have lung cancer, which is not, right? So that's part of the risk assessment that we need to be doing on our AI models, because is that relevant? So it's not just the cybersecurity point of view. It's not just the infrastructure security model. Is the outcome of the AI model, the AI algorithm that we're using, to make sure that we're not going to be impacting people's lives in a negative way. So that's what it's risk assessment about. So we need to make sure that we detect the bias. I mean, that it goes out of those boundaries. We need to make sure that the privacy of the data, it's okay, is within check. And once that we mitigate those risks, we need to make the approval on the company to say, I'm good with the level of risk on the probability of occurrence of a disaster, pretty much. So that's what we talk about. That's what we're trying to come out with the risk assessment. So the impact and the probability of occurrence of an incident. If you guys have any questions, just let me know, or we can wait till the end to go over those questions for us. Okay. So we still have some time. Okay, so the impact. So we already did a risk assessment, right? So and this is new, the AI impact. This is new on 42001. So we didn't have this on previous management model. So the assessment on the AI impact is, we need to make sure, like we've been talking about, the bias detection means that we are going out of the boundary of false positives, right? To provide false information based on the algorithm, and the privacy and the data protection that we need to comply, GDPR, or we have federal law of public data being treated by third parties in Mexico, or I mean, every country has their own acts, right? On the case for the EU, it's going to be GDPR, and what it says is what's going to be the company impact on running this model inside the organization, right? So I'm a business that I'm creating AI models to display them as a SaaS platform. So we need to know what's the impact for my business, my legal obligations of running that model publicly. So what's the risk that I'm going to be working with? So this the risk assessment that is part of the previous. So we need to make the risk assessment. I'm okay with the level of probability of occurrence of a disaster within my organization. So now I need to quantify the impact of that risk. So if I'm able to identify and approve the level of risk, so I need to make sure that I have a mitigation and the management of those risks, right? So that's part of the impact assessment. So again, let's go over. So we need to identify the stakeholders that are going to be involved, uh, top management, to push down all those changes. So we need to understand the scope, the context of the certification process for my organization. I need to identify the impact for my organization at the time that I'm running an AI model, right? So from there, I need to make the risk assessment so that way I can bridge that gap between this is what I want, this is what the regulations are is required for. Once that we run that risk assessment, so we need to make that AI impact assessment by mitigating the level of the risk to the acceptable one, to the acceptable level with the management. And from there, the same previous step. So we need to be able to monitor it, reproduce it, to document it, so that way it's going to be able to be audited by an external auditor. So, and the process keeps going and going and going. So we need to identify what's the impact for my organization, talking about the bias detection, right? The privacy and the data protection compliance, and the transparency and the traceability of those requirements. And when I talk about bias detection and fairness evaluation, data engineers, at the time of them calculating that algorithm for our AI model. So what you do here is you have your data set, right? And depending of the algorithm that you're going to be using, so you have your LLM models, and you need to identify the amount of records that you're going to be using for testing and for production. Because that way, every time that you run your checks on that algorithm, the bias is, and that's a whole different conversation as well about machine learning and using Python for AI and machine learning models. But so when you run your training data sets, right? So the result needs to be the nearest probability of occurrence to one, right? So meaning that the result of processing that data is one, it says that the 100% of the data, it's a healthy amount of data, right? The farthest that you move from one, that's the probability of occurrence. I mean, the probability to be correct data. That's called bias. So if my bias, the probability of occurrence, it's far away from one, means that the data doesn't work for that model. So we need to be gathering new data, or we need to be cleaning the data better during the ingest process. So, and that's part of the mitigation of those risks. So, but this one goes directly to the data engineer that is designing the AI algorithm to process that information for us. And I mean, data protection, again, AI. So we have GDPR for the UA. And what it says is pretty much forward, right? So we need to make sure that we are aligned with the law. We need to make sure that we are able to provide transparency to access the people's data. So why am I closing part of that data to the rest of the public? So that's the purpose. So the data risk or the data breach minimization. So I'm not gonna be having data security breaches because my control says that only this amount of people is approved to go in there and manipulate the data. Or if I'm publicly posting part of that information, my controls within my organization says that there's going to be no personal information publicly available, right? So I'm just using portion of the information to process a different result. And of course, so the integrity and the confidentiality. So it needs to be available, needs to be integrity, and it needs to be confidential. So all the controls that we have within our organization, and this is a whole different certification process, the GDPR, and we need to be we need to be accountable for the data that that we're storing, or the data that we are managing for the people. So GDPR, this is something also that you need to be aware of, and also because most of the companies that are using AI models, they are worldwide based, right? So they might have the headquarters in the US as they may have it on Germany, right? So GDPR is this framework that is aligned for the EU countries. So GDPR is always very important with the organizations that we're going to be working with, because they need to be aligned with the EU Privacy Act as well. Sorry. So, all right, going back to the roadmap, right? So, is my company ready to be ISO 42001 certified? So we need to go back again. So we need to do the gap analysis, right? So, all right. So my organization has the funds. So my organization has the infrastructure. My organization has the people and the training for that people and the awareness and top management. is okay with the scope. So if we have all those layers lined up, so that's the step one. So yes, I have all of this, but on top, I need to make sure that I run my gap analysis to assess the risk and the impact for the AI model. And that way, management can determine if they go through the risk or not. So that's it. So is my company ready? The gap analysis is your starting point. Am I ready or not to run a ISO 42001 certification process? So based on your gap analysis, I'm willing to I'm all for it. Yes, but we need to have the gap analysis completed, okay, by top management, so that way we can move to the rest, right? So if I'm good, if my risk is within the boundaries that I can accept for my company, the AI assessment, it's okay for my company approach. So I'm okay with running that risk. So yes, let's go ahead and do the deployment process for ISO 42001 on the organization. So yeah, I'm good with the gap analysis. I approve or take the risk assessment. I'm okay. So we need to have the definition for the governance structure for the AI group and the leadership. So that's a different cell, right? So they need to be working as a separate cell. And then we need to have the scope and the objectives. And from there, we need to deploy the 42,000 policies and the documentation, the controls, right? So the clauses that we have, we need to make sure that we're covering all of those. And once that we have that ready, so I need to run my AI risk assessment because I already have the rest of the process ready. I have the okay, I have the approval. The management is involved on this, and then we can do the deployment for the controls. Annex A. It's always a good reading. If you guys can download it or you can buy it online. Annex A, B, C, and the controls. That's going to give you a more clear point of view or what is needed for those deployments. And then, so we need to be training our teams. We need to be bringing them awareness, right, for the AI risk that we have and the governance. I mean, on these days, AI models uh, they move from a good idea up to a govern structure, right? So we need to have controls for running those AI models within our organization. From there, we need to be reproducing the process. We need to make sure that we can monitor it. We need to make sure that we can document it and we can validate it, right? So that way we can start our continual improvement process within the organization for our AI model. And once that we have those results, we can do the performance evaluation. So I need to make sure that what's the health of my AI model, right? Am I running it correctly? Am I overstepping on adding too much infrastructure? Can I reduce the amount of infrastructure now? Can I tune up my AI algorithm to be with a better performance or the way that I can improve my process? Once that you're able to do all of these 9 steps, you can be certified. So at the moment that you have your continual improvement process means that you were able to monitor, reproduce, and record all of your AI steps. And that means that your team is ready, trained, and aware of the governance culture in the organization. So we deploy all the controls, all the annexes for the ISO 42001 model. So we've done our risk assessment, our impact assessment, we deploy the policies, we have our scope, we're good to get certified. That's the step where the external auditor comes in and determines if the maturity of the model is good enough to be certified. So we need to have the companion for a lead implementer, all the steps, all the steps. So is my company ready for ISO 42001? Uh, my gap analysis is going to be resolving that question because my organization might be willing to go for it, but the result of the gap analysis is the one that is going to be able to tell us if we are okay with the risk. So, what's the timeline to get certified? Roughly, Around like 9 months. It depends on the maturity of your model. Uh, I mean, within the first and the second month, we're going to be running the gap analysis, leadership alignment to make sure that it's aligned with the scope, the resource allocation, that it's like a pretty important part of the process. Once that we have ready, month 3 and 4 is going to be the design and development for the policies based on ISO 42001 standard, the AI management system framework deployment. And from there, we're going to be doing those assessments, the control checks, the monitoring setup to make sure that we are recording all the process all the way up, right? So we can audit those results and we can reproduce it. From there, month 7 to 9, we are ready to have the external auditor coming into the organization and make the first audits checks, right? So we've been working 6 months. This is like their standard deployment timeline for month 1 up to month 6 to deploy a ISO 42001. And it always helps if you have your ISO 27001 already deployed, because it shares some of the controls with ISO 27000. So it makes it a little bit easier. And well, the audit, I mean, it has to be compliant, right? Everything that we've been talking about, we are willing to. We have the funds for it. So what's the end benefit of this? That we can run our AI models on the healthcare sector, financial services, law enforcement, government areas as well, critical infrastructure within the organizations like automotive industries, chemical labs, vertical farming, and autonomous transport. So more and more often we're seeing these drone services, right? So we need to rely on the AI models that we have designed to make sure that we are able to go from point A to point B using data ethically and responsible to deliver our service. So it's just in this case, the drone is just the service in between the processing for data that we need to be responsible for. So that's the end result. So if my model doesn't work, I'm going to be failing on complying with all those laws that we have to be able to work on healthcare services, financial services, law enforcement, and government. So that as good as it get. So um, man, just to start closing down the session. So we need this is what I'm talking about, the biases, right? So we need to make sure that the data result is fair, and we need to prevent discrimination on the people, on the citizens. So every time that we run the model, we need to make sure that we don't have false positives, because we may be impacting people by discriminating the result. So and we need to be running audits and checks, perf monitor on the algorithms that we have, and we need to be documenting all of those testing. So we're talking about algorithms, so we're talking about software development. So we need to make sure that we have our checks for that portion of code that is being tested, right, before it's been deployed. So the QA process that we deploy within the organization is going to be working to document those results. And all right, so just remember, I mean, how can it works on a faster way? I mean, week 1 to 2, we need to make sure that management is on board. Week 3 to 4, so we need to be working on the gap analysis. 5 to 8, so that way you can like cut it down to weeks, right? So we can start by a brief policy for the framework, and from there you can start deploying a pilot ISO 42001 deployment with the key clauses. So this is like a short way on how to deliver a ISO 42001 model. If you have already your 27001 controls, right, you can be out there up and running in about 3 months, but that depends on management. So if top management is not involved, the rest of the people is not going to be on board. So we need to be able to work with the people. We need to be able to make people aware of the impact on the business for the AI model, the risk that we are talking. So if you have ISO 27001, you can be out there up and running in about 3 months. But depends on management uh, to be able to be working on this deployment with the models. So just to start closing the session. So what are we taking about this conversation today? So AI regulations is a must-have. I mean, we're not uh, relying out there on publicly available models because they're not going to be cyber secure, right? Or they're not going to be secure enough. So it's a must. So AI regulations is not negotiable. We need to have a ISO 42001 certification within the company. So that way, that badge says I'm running data ethically and publicly available with all of these controls. And again, leadership. We need to have leadership committed to the successful deployment of an ISO 42000 model because they need to be involved. I mean, it's to push all the way down, right? If they see that top management is complying with all the controls that is in, they're going to start pushing down the company's structure, the changes, so that way we have a successful ISO 40001 deployment. And we can start, I mean, if it's a new company, we can start creating the company using the ISO 42000 basis. So that way, at the moment that we have a good and a mature product that we're going to be launching, it's already aligned to 42001. So creating AI departments aligned to 42001 since the beginning. I mean, I know that it's not always possible, right? Because we have the idea and we created that part of the business, and we have all the models ready to go to production, and then we need to make it we need to make sure that they are secure enough, right? So that's the portion of the business that needs to have a fast track, so that way we can certify the organization. So with this, I mean, is your organization ready? What do you think? I mean, with what with what you saw on your infrastructure, on your resource allocation, on your top management commitment with AI models. I don't know. Are you ready? So what's the next step for us here today, GSDC? I'm very thankful for them asking me to join you to this keynote. For you guys, thank you to join in to uh, share a part of your day, right? Time within your life to come up here and talk about these new models and the way that we can certify your organizations. So we're gonna move out now to the Q&A sessions. So if you guys have, let me